So today I'm really excited to be testing out the highly anticipated GFX100. It's a 102 megapixel behemoth of a digital medium format camera that's not just an increased resolution version of the GFX50 R or S. It's a brand new device with lots of exciting new features. So today I've got a creative team pulled together. We're going to take some nice portraits and hopefully find out just what this thing is capable of. So let's begin by talking about that headline stealing 102 megapixel sensor. It's a backside illuminated sensor. There is the same physical dimension as the one found in the GFX 50R and 50S, but double the resolution. And it's 1.7 times larger than a full frame sensor. Now, previously, Fujifilm have called this sensor a medium format sensor. They're now calling it a large format sensor. I'd probably go with the former out of the two. I think it's more accurate. But suffice to say, this camera has a great big sensor. This low-pass filterless sensor has been paired with an X Processor Pro as found in the X-T3 and can produce 14-bit or 16-bit RAW files and TIFFs, ensuring impressive color depth and dynamic range, as well as a crazy amount of detail in its files, and with a dual gain design, solid noise control across its 100 to 12,800 native ISO range. The camera can shoot at 5 frames per second for 14 RAWs in its continuous high mode, or 20 in its 2 frames per second continuous low mode. This isn't a hugely fast burst rate, but it's pretty respectable for a medium format camera, and rarely would more be needed in its natural shooting environments. The camera's shutter is rated for 150,000 shots, and has an electronic shutter for silent shooting and shutter speeds over 1/4000th of a second. The GFX100 offers additional photographic effects that users may or may not want to employ, including the grain effect for getting the look of analog photos, the color chrome effect, and the smooth skin effect, a new function developed for the GFX100 for smoothing the skin for use in portrait photography, where that masses of detail captured could be pretty unforgiving. Now, just zooming into images on the back of this camera, it's quite apparent from the off that it's going to produce far more resolution than most photographers are going to need. You know, it's very much aimed at commercial shooters, and even they are not really going to need 100 megapixels a lot of the time. You know, cameras like the GFX 50S and 50R would probably meet their demands anyway. One of the nice benefits of that resolution, though, is that you can do some really interesting crops or really interesting image ratios, and you're still going to have a massive amount of resolution to play with, even in those files. So, you know, if you want to shoot in something that's a bit obscure, you're going to be able to do it and still make massive, simply massive prints with the files from this device. Now, with a higher resolution sensor like this, the risk of perceivable camera shake in shots is much greater. You know, when you've got such a high resolution file, all those tiny little camera movements when you really zoom into a shot can sometimes mean that they look a little bit blurry. And that's one of the reasons that traditionally these kind of cameras, these high resolution and digital medium format cameras, have generally been used either on a tripod or in studio conditions like this, where you can really pump a lot of light into a shot for a sharp result. That kind of changes with this device, though. Fujifilm have incorporated a 5-axis stabilization system into this device, which can compensate for up to 5.5 stops of camera shake. So if you're out and about and perhaps light conditions aren't quite perfect, you're using natural lighting, with this device, you still have a really good shot at getting nice, sharp, handheld shots in conditions where other similar devices would have long given up. For a device like this, you know, that's a real game changer. Now, one of the aspects of the GFX 50S and 50R that never really won me over was the autofocus performance. You know, it was fairly accurate, but it was fairly slow. And I know that's true of a lot of digital medium format cameras, but you know, as someone that's normally used to reviewing DSLRs and CSCs, it just felt a little bit clunky and not particularly, you know, intuitive. Thankfully, Fujifilm have done something about it with this camera though. This camera has a new intelligent hybrid autofocus system, more akin to that found in the X-T3, and this has led to what they claim is a 210% increase to its autofocus speed. Now, you know, 210%, that's a hard thing to measure, but certainly using this today, the improvement is really noticeable, and I'm really enjoying using this camera a lot more when it comes to its autofocus performance. Now, another fairly unique set of features that can be found on this camera which really set it apart from its rivals is its set of video features. It can shoot cinema 4K at 30 frames per second internally at 400 megabits per second in 10-bit 420 internally or 422 externally. Now that would be fairly admirable on any current mirrorless, but to have it on this is pretty surprising, to be honest. 60 frames per second Full HD is also available, and there are inputs for an external microphone and headphones. F-Log and hybrid log gamma are both also supported. And there's no crop on this video either. Now, I've only shot a small bit of video with it today, but my first impressions are that it looks pretty damn good. Of course, you can also make use of all the camera's film simulation options while using it, the camera's autofocus and stabilization as well. Now, it's highly unlikely that anyone is going to be buying this camera as their main video camera. There are far cheaper options out there with probably more features, but you know, having a device which can capture these fantastic stills and shoot a little bit of video when you need is really going to appeal to a lot of people, particularly in an age where lots of clients want a little bit of video content to stick up on their social channels while a shoot is happening. Now, as I'm sure you'll already have picked up, this camera is quite a different device to the GFX 50R or the 50S. It's probably closer to the 50S out of the two, and one of the main reasons is this big inbuilt vertical grip. It's the first Fujifilm, I think I'm right in saying, to ever have an inbuilt grip, and it houses two batteries which will produce around 800 shots from one full charge, and that's a real DSLR rivaling figure. That 800 shots from a mirrorless camera is pretty damn respectable. Now, this grip isn't textured like most grips, and that helps it to stay a little bit sleeker, but it doesn't perhaps feel quite as ergonomic when using it in a portrait orientation. Controls are pretty much mirrored, but I just tend to arch my hand anyway when using it in this orientation. It's a larger and heavier camera than previous GFX models at 1.4 kilograms with its EVF batteries and memory card fitted, and it measures roughly around 16 centimeters in height and width and 10 centimeters in depth. That still makes it comparable to professional DSLR models like the Nikon D5 and Canon 1DX Mark II though, which for a medium format camera is still pretty compact. Manufactured from magnesium alloy and weather sealed in 95 places, it's freeze proof to -10 Celsius and pretty rugged for such a device, making it suitable for on-location shooting in places similar devices might not fare so well. Gone off Fujifilm's normal setting control dials, instead this camera has a 1.8-inch sub-LCD screen which can be set to display a virtual dial mode with settings adjusted using the front and rear control dials. Other display options that can be selected include a setting reference panel with exposure meter or a histogram. On the bottom of the camera's rear there is also a sub-monitor which can be set to show setting information or a histogram as well. These options allow the main 3.2-inch 2.36 million dot tilting touch display to be kept clear for total image composition. A new drive button can also be found on top of the camera, allowing the fast selection of movie, multi and still shooting options. This new handling setup may take a bit of getting used to for some, but all controls are still kept close to hand, and I quite enjoyed the level of customization that can be made to how information is displayed and where. When it comes to the camera's electronic viewfinder, the GFX100 maintains the GFX50S's popular detachable EVF system, which can be used with its tilting accessory to be used at a variety of angles. It upgrades this EVF, however, to a 0.5-inch OLED with a fantastic resolution of 5.6 million dots to provide the clarity really needed when using this sensor. It has a 0.86 times magnification, diopter and eye sensor, and I have to be honest, is a real joy to use. Now the GFX100 has two UHS 2 compatible card slots, although if I'm being totally honest, I'm quite surprised that there's not an XQD or a CF Express card slot in there to handle those really massive file sizes that this thing can produce. Now obviously not every photographer is going to need a camera which can shoot 100 megapixel stills, and not every photographer is going to want to spend 10K on a camera body alone, but if you're a commercial shooter who's looking for the total in image quality and also, you know, a camera with lots of flexibility which you don't normally find on a digital medium format, you know, things like that really good autofocus system, the stabilization, the video shooting functions, then this camera is really going to appeal to you. Certainly if this is the shape of things to come for the GFX line, we've got some very exciting times ahead. So for more information about the GFX100, visit lcegroup.co.uk.